going to develop a REST-based service application using pure Node.js. The application, whatever we are going to develop now, will support standard CRUD operations using get, post, put, and delete. We can develop REST applications in quite a few number of ways using Node.js. However, to make things simple and to learn the internals of Node, I would like to limit importing external Node packages as much as possible. Let's quickly take a look at the goals of this application. The first goal is to develop a pure Node.js REST application without really having any third-party modules or packages to be imported. And whatever the REST application we are going to develop need to support at least these four verbs. Those are get, put, post, put, and delete exclusively for create, read, update, and delete operations. And the second goal is we do not really want to have any kind of external packages or modules to be imported here just to learn the internals of Node.js. So we are not going to work with any Restify or Express.js based frameworks here in order to work with REST. The third thing is that in order to store the information for all of these REST operations, I am using Microsoft SQL Server as my data storage. So it is not necessary to really use any RDBMS to store your data. You can also use NoSQL based databases like MongoDB or whatever. But still, whatever I am going to explain here is very much important with respect to the REST application development, but not really to what kind of data storage you will be working with. So the concepts whatever I'm going to explain here still makes sense, but the only thing is that you might really want to replace the code related to Microsoft SQL Server in place of any other database related code. The second thing is that we need to have a modular based approach to be maintained. So in all of my previous applications or say previous videos, I have been writing all the code in app.js itself. So in this case, I am going to have some kind of modular approach to be followed with respect to the standards of Node.js. And finally, we are going to have all REST related testing to be done only through a couple of HTTP tools. So we are not going to develop any kind of REST based client here. So we are going to test our REST based service using HTTP tools. So the next thing is app overview. So as part of this app overview, we are going to look into how our REST service is going to be developed and what kind of features it is going to be supporting. So as part of this, you can see that I am going to develop a REST service, and that particular REST service is going to be developed using Node.js. And using Node.js, I am going to develop a HTTP server which will be listening for all the requests with respect to the REST principles. And from this Node.js HTTP server, whatever I am going to develop, we are going to work with mssql server or SQL Server in this case to store the data or to manipulate the data. So we have HTTP server which needs to be developed, and that HTTP server will be listening for all the REST based requests from the client, and finally we are going to have all the data to be manipulated and stored or maintained at SQL Server. Similarly, in order to work with a REST service or in order to consume a REST service, you can have any kind of HTTP tool to be used to test it or to work with it. So whenever I say HTTP tool, it could be directly a browser itself or any kind of HTTP tools including Fiddler or what I say Postman, which are actually the plugins of Chrome. So you can use any of those. So not necessarily just this. If you are familiar with a Windows environment, you can develop any .NET based application which essentially consumes the REST service. So that could be a WPF or Windows Forms based applications. If you are familiar with Java, you can also have any native Java based application to be communicating with REST service. And on top of that, if you are familiar with any of the web application development using PHP or JSP or ASP.NET or MVC, or for that matter any single page application development using AngularJS or whatever, still you can consume the same REST service which we are going to develop now. So on top of all of the above, if you are having any kind of knowledge with respect to mobile application development using iOS or Android or Windows Phone or something of that sort, you can still work with the same REST service. So which means we are going to have one REST web service to be developed which can essentially be consumed by any of these clients. But we are not going to develop any of these clients. All we are going to do is use a couple of HTTP tools in order to test our REST service whether they are going to work or not. So my particular HTTP tool, whatever I'm going to use now, is going to send all those get, post, put and delete based requests through the internet, and those requests are going to be further forwarded to Node.js HTTP server. So this HTTP server will be continuously listening for any of the requests which are coming through this HTTP tool or any of these clients for that matter, and it processes that information and stores into the SQL server. And if we are trying to fetch in information, the information will be retrieved from the SQL server and finally converted back to JSON or whatever the format we specify, and will be responded back to the respective client. So in order to develop this Node.js application, I am going to have essentially all of these JavaScript files to be developed. So which means I am going to have some kind of core library, controllers library, and the main app.js. So the core will have the database related communication, which acts like a database access layer. So I'm going to develop a very simple db.js just for the concept. So this acts as a data access layer, and this is the one which essentially sends various HTTP codes back to the client, like 404 error or 403 or 200. So those are all the HTTP codes and the respective messages, any validation issues, all of those will be communicated to the browser through this particular JavaScript file. So on top of that, this is the main one, which essentially is nothing but HTTP server. So which means I'm going to have the server to be developed here, which will be listening for all these requests, and based on the requests this one receives, all those requests will be forwarded to employee.js, where the respective operations like create, read, update, delete will be handled by this employee.js, and that employee.js together internally will be working with db.js in order to work with SQL Server. So server receives it, and we are going to use employee.js, which internally works with db.js to finally get in touch with SQL Server right there. So now that we have understood on how the application is going to be developed, we need to understand also what our application is not going to cover. So we are anyway developing the entire service, which is the HTTP server, and I already have the SQL Server on my machine, and in my previous video I already covered on how to connect to SQL Server and so on. So we are going to develop all these JavaScript files, and on top of that we are just going to use HTTP tools in order to test with REST service. So let us see what is not covered as part of this application or video. So there is no security involved here, so which means our application right now, whatever we are going to develop, does not really ask for or secured enough. So anyone can really post any kind of information or update my information as part of database, which is not generally the practice, or it is not supposed to happen. So but as I would like to have the things to be made quite simple, I am just not involving any security as part of my REST service. No security is involved here, and it is going to be a great security hole if you directly go with this kind of approach in the production. Next, I am not having any REST client development. So as I mentioned in my previous slide, we are not going to develop any of this stuff. We are just going to use whatever the tools which are already available in the market to test the REST service. So we are not developing any of the REST clients, including Node.js. So all we are going to develop is just the server, and that is the service itself. On top of that, we are not going to use any external web modules like Express.js or Restify, which are frequently used as part of Node.js development. We are not going to use them as because we just wanted to make sure that we understood the concepts of Node.js from the scratch. And next, we are not integrating or using any kind of data storage related to NoSQL. So if you are thinking like MongoDB or whatever, that is not going to be connected here. So I'm going to have a new video to be developed exclusively for MongoDB, but for now we will have to keep with SQL Server. That being said, you can still modify whatever the code I am going to write here with respect to db.js. You can still modify this db.js to work with your MongoDB, and all of this, whatever I am going to develop for HTTP messages, server, employee, app, all of those will be still working and should be worked regardless of what kind of implementation you might have with database. So that being said, let us jump directly into the code itself. Okay, so this is my database here. So sorry, this is the database instance, and this is my database called sampledb, and I have a simple table called emp which looks something similar to this. So all I really have is just 4 columns and 6 rows. So we are going to have all the CRUD operations to be done against this table. So I can retrieve all the rows, I can add or modify or delete the rows which are existing as part of this particular table. So this is the only table we are going to use, as because we would like to make our life easier to learn Node.js here. So let us switch to Visual Studio and start creating a new project. And in here I'm going to select Node.js, and I'm going to call this one as sample rest and click OK. Okay, so by default it has already got app.js, but I do not want this. So I'm going to write this app.js bit later. For now, let us close this and let us see if I have any npms here. So I don't have any npm. But as you know, we are going to work with SQL Server. I would like to add a new SQL Server package. So in this case, I'm going to work with mssql package in order to connect to SQL Server. So just select this and click install. Make sure that you always have this one checked on. So I click install package. Okay, so let's close it, and you should have mssql package imported into your project. So now that we have mssql, I do not want to have any other package to be imported here. So we just work only with mssql for now. So the first thing is that in order to connect to the database, we usually need to have the server, database, username, password, and other kind of criteria which are essential in order to connect to the database itself. So usually we can hard code it, but that is not how we are going to have it now. So we are going with the standard practice now, saying that I would like to read all of those using some kind of settings. So for that purpose, I am going to add a new JS file. So let me go to add new item, and in this case I select script, and let us name this one as settings.js and click add. So all I'm going to have, okay, I actually added in a wrong one, so let me delete all this stuff. I need to add to the project but not to the solution. So let me add JavaScript file again. So go to JavaScript file, and in this case again I just wanted to modify this one to settings.js. So there you go. So we have the settings here. So in this settings file, I need to have all the database related configuration and other kinds of settings also to be maintained. So for now, in this case, I maintain only the DB config. And as I mentioned, we would like to go with the standards of Node.js modular development. I'm going to have this settings file or this settings JavaScript to be included or made required by other JavaScript files automatically. So for that purpose, whatever the objects I would like to expose from this settings.js need to be mentioned with exports prefix. So I can just say exports dot dbconfig. So dbconfig is my setting. This is just a JSON object. So in this case I can say something like this. So as part of dbconfig, which means I would like to have all the configuration parameters for the database to be maintained in the form of a single JSON object, and that particular dbconfig needs to be made available to other modules whatever we are going to develop, and that is the reason that particular object is mentioned with exports. It is prefixed with exports as because we need to have this JSON to be always made available to other modules. So in this case, as I would like to have the username to be provided, so in this case it is user SA, password to connect to the database is SQL 2014, and server in which I would like to connect to, so it is localhost /SQL 2K14, and database, so which database I am going to connect to. So let me switch back, so it is sample DB. So let me use the same name. So I'm going to use sample DB as my database, and the port number, of course the default is 1433, so I'm going to use the same here. It is not essential, but just going to be more specific. So now that we have the settings in place, I would like to use these settings in the DB file whatever I was asking. So as I mentioned in my previous slide, I am going to develop db.js. So whenever I am developing the db.js, I need settings information in order to connect to database. The settings are available as part of our settings.js. So this same information can be made available to our db.js. So if I quickly return back here, as I mentioned, I'm going to create a folder called core, and inside the core I'm going to start with db.js. So for that purpose, let me start a new folder here called core, and in that I would like to have a new JavaScript file called db to be created. And now you can see db.js. Essentially we are trying to follow what we have in here. So we have app.js, and now I created db.js. So as part of this db.js, the first thing is that we need to work with SQL Server database. So in order to work with SQL Server database, we already have mssql here. So that is how we are going to connect to SQL Server, and this is the driver I am going to use. So let us quickly declare that SQL DB using mssql. So that's the first thing. And the next thing is that I need the database configuration information to connect to the database. That configuration information is available inside settings.js, and this follows our node modular model. So in order to import these settings, I'm going to follow the same way on how I have written here, except that instead of mssql, I'm going to say please go back to a previous folder and search for the settings.js, and once it finds it, I would like to have all of the information whatever we are exporting from that file needs to be available in this object. So which means it is going to the previous folder, as because currently you are in DB and settings is outside. So I had to get back to the previous folder and then go to settings.js, and this settings.js is executed, and upon execution all those particular objects or the members which have been prefixed with exports will be automatically made available as part of settings. Now I can say settings dot, and you can see db config is automatically available. So similarly, if you have one more object, something like exports dot something equal to something like this, and let us go back here and let me say settings dot something, So whatever you export there, you are going to get it no matter what. So you have the db config and something right here. So that is the simplest way on how we can have something to be exported and be reused in other modules. So for now, let me remove whatever I have here. So I go back to no db.js. So I have settings. Settings means essentially I have this object right now. So I need to access this object wherever is necessary for me. So let me go back to my DB, and even I would like to have this DB also to be a module by itself so that I can reuse this DB wherever is necessary, just like the settings. Now just I have the settings, I would like to use very similar kind of statement even for db.js as well in other files or in other modules. For that purpose, again I'm going to have exports.execute SQL. So this is the new function I'm going to write, which essentially gets in touch with SQL Server and tries to execute whatever the SQL statement I provide, and on top of that it just executes the callback whatever we are going to send it. So all we are doing is just expose one function called execute SQL from this DB module. So I'm going to say execute SQL is a function which accepts two parameters, SQL and a callback function. So it is as simple as that. So I'm going to have only one function to be exported from this DB. In settings, we exported an object. In DB, we are just exporting only one function. So the job of this particular function is to execute SQL, which means whatever I'm going to provide to the SQL needs to be executed by directly going to SQL Server. So I need to use mssql now, which is available as part of SQL DB, to open the connection and to execute the request. So I'm going to create connection instance by saying new SQL DB dot connection, and I'm going to use settings.dbconfig now. So this connection requires all these parameters, user and everything, and we stored all of these as part of dbconfig, and that dbconfig is made available through settings, and I'm just using settings.dbconfig. And now that we have the connection instance, the next thing is that we need to open the connection, and once it is opened we need to have request and other things to be executed. So let me open the connection using connection.connect, and once the connection has been made, I would like to have a function to be executed, and for some reason if there exists any error to get in touch with database, I would like to have a catch to be executed, which will have its own function with all the error information which needs to be executed right here. So this is the simplest signature. So all I'm saying here is that I'm trying to connect. If the connection is successful, execute this function. If the connection is not successful, execute this function. While executing this function, all the error related information will be automatically passed to this function with error or ERR as the object. So this object is automatically filled by Node.js framework, or say in this case it is mssql, and that will be automatically forwarded to us. And as part of this function, all I'm going to do is, okay, let me take this one to the next line so that it will be clear for us on what we are doing. Okay, so this is then part and this is catch part. So as part of this catch part, I have the error. So if I am unable to connect to the database, I'm going to have this error. So as part of this error, I would like to log that particular error at the server, and on top of that I would like to say please execute the callback function with no data and just pass my error object. So callback is the function you are going to send to this, and I'm executing the same callback function by writing callback or whatever. And this callback function needs to have two parameters from its source, and I'm expecting that the first parameter will always have the data to be filled in, and the second parameter is going to be error. So as I'm unable to connect to the database, I do not have any data to be sent back to the callback function, so I'm just sending null. But at the same time I'm sending also error. So if the first parameter of that callback function is null, they can check for error and see whether there is any problem there. But imagine the what I say, then is successful. So which means our connection is successful. If the connection is successful, we need to create a request instance and then execute it. So let me create a new instance called new SQL db.request, and this request has to use the connection object whatever we have created here. And on top of that, I would like to have this particular request to have the query whatever I mentioned here, which is nothing but this SQL, to be executed. So if that particular execution is successful, then I would like to have a function to be executed. And while executing it, I am going to have the record set to be automatically passed by my mssql driver here. For some reason, if this is going to have an error, I am going to have a catch, and that particular catch again will have another function to be executed, so which is nothing but an error. So in that way, I have a query, and if that query's execution is successful, this will be executed, where the data will be made available as part of this one automatically. If the query is unsuccessful, it might go into an error, and that error information is automatically made available as part of ERR. So let me take this one also to the next line so that it will be clear for us on what we are doing. Okay, so this is the then block for this request, and similarly this is the catch block for this request as well. So imagine the request is successful, then that particular data whatever I received needs to be sent to the callback itself. So I am going to say callback, here is your record set, and I am done. For example, if that particular query runs into an error, again I will be using the same method whatever I used here to actually log the error, and as I do not have any data here, I am going to send null, but on top of that I am going to send the error information as well. So this is the simplest database access I provided here. Essentially this SQL should work for select statement, insert or update or delete. So whatever you pass in here, it is going to open the connection, does the request, it tries to execute it, and if it executes successfully, we are going to have the record set and will be returned back. If there is no record set, there will not be any data, however still callback is going to be executed. Okay, so we have settings which is completed for now, and we have db.js for which we made it simple. So even this looks completed. So let us return back to my presentation. So now let us start developing employees.js. So I would like to take this one under the controllers. So let me create a new folder here and call this one as controller. And under the controller, I am going to add a new item that is going to be called as employee.js for now. And this file is going to be something like the main file to communicate with the db.js and to work with our server. So which means all the CRUD operations related to the EMP table will be made available as part of this employee.js. So all the gets, all the add, update, delete, all those operations are going to be made available through this employee.js. But again, all those operations, get, add, update, delete, all of those will be working with db behind the scenes. So for that purpose, I need to import this db first. So let us import that. Variable db equal to require, and this particular require, I am going to go back to core and get db right there. So why? Because employee, I have to go back to the previous folder and I have to go to the core folder and then get to the db.js. So that is exactly what I'm getting here. So I already exported one function through that particular module, and that function should be automatically available by just writing db.execute SQL automatically. Okay, so on top of that, I would like to have a kind of what I say HTTP messages to be developed here. So if you go back here, you can see I was talking about HTTP messages. So before even creating the HTTP messages, let us have all the functions which are necessary to be exported as part of this module. So the first thing is that I would like to have get employees list to be made as a function which accepts request and response objects. So this is one function which I would like to expose. And on top of that, I would like to have another function which exclusively gets only one employee information based on the employee number you are going to send to that. So now you can see this one is supposed to get all the list of employees. However, this one is going to get only one employee row based on the employee number you are going to send. And this request and response will be automatically executed or passed from server.js. So you can see this is the one which actually picks up the request and response, and those two objects we are going to send to employee.js. So let us complete our signatures first. So I have two signatures for getting the information, and I am going to have a couple more for others. Exports.add, so which means add an employee. And as part of add, I would like to have every information to be passed here. So I just mentioned as request body for now. Why? Because add usually is a post operation. So if it is post operation, we need to have the body. The gets do not have any kind of posts, so those are get operations, so we do not need any posting information there. But add is a post which will certainly have some kind of information from the user, like employee name, salary, department number, and so on. Those will be made as part of request body, and this is just a variable. It could be anything, so I can just say body as well. So but just to make out things clear, it is going to be request body. So on top of that, I would also need to have a couple more for update and delete. So let me have update, and similarly let me have the delete as well. So you can see, other than the gets, I have always other information to be passed in the form of body. So this is a simple employee.js where it will have all the interfacing necessary to work with the table called EMP, and all those interfaces are being exported or exposed to other modules automatically. And as part of these particular functions, whatever we are going to write now, internally within each of these functions we are going to access db.executesql to simply get the select of all employees, select all of employees with where condition, insert, update, and delete. So those statements I am going to execute right using db. So let us start with get list and see how it is working. So I would like to have db.execute SQL, and in that I would like to say select star from emp, and I would like to say a function which needs to be passed as callback. So whenever I say callback, you can see execute SQL. So if you quickly jump back to execute SQL, it is accepting two parameters. One is SQL, the other is callback. So SQL, you can understand what it is. And callback essentially is a variable here, but however you are going to send a function. So this function will be automatically taken as a parameter into the callback, and you are going to execute that particular function by just using the parenthesis here. So the moment you use parenthesis here, you are executing the function whatever has been sent as a parameter. So if you can see, that particular callback should have at least two parameters. The first one is data, the second one is error. So in this case I'm not sending error, so the first one is supposed to be picking up data. In this case data is going to be null, but I am going to send error. So my callback function essentially should have two parameters at least, and the first one is data, the second one is error. So this definition is going to be sent to my db.js, and the same definition is going to be executed either here or here or here. So if you have data, this one is going to be executed, and the first parameter record set will be automatically made available to data. If you execute this guy, then you can see the data will be null. However, I am going to have error which will be automatically made available to error. So in that way, I have a callback function which needs to be executed once that particular select statement has been completed. So now imagine that you have the select statement and that is executed. So you have two things. One is either you might have the result or you might have an error. So you need to check if already any kind of error exists. If no error exists, then you can simply send back the data. So let us check for error first. So I would like to check if error is available. If error is not available, I would like to have else part to be executed. So if it is an error, then we have to show some kind of invalid data or invalid input or internal error, some kind of error related message. For that purpose, usually we'll be sending 500 code, that is the HTTP 500 code, which actually stands for internal error occurred. So that is the one we are going to send. So how do we send directly? Of course, you can actually send by writing some kind of HTML or JSON or whatever. For example, I can say, as I have the response object here, which actually directly talks to the response. So I can say response dot write. First of all, I need to say write header, and I would like to say 500 and internal error occurred. And as part of this one, I have to say content type as, in this case, I would like to send text HTML. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. First thing is that I need to write the header, response header. I'm saying that it is 500, so which means it is an error. And more than that, I need to have some information of error also to be passed in. For that purpose, I'm going to use HTML to send the error information back. So I can just say response.write, and as part of this one, I can say something like hard-coded HTML and hard-coded body here, and let me close body. On top of that, I would like to close HTML as well. So I can have a header tag as well. Inside the header, I can have a title. So inside the title, I can just say 500, and inside the body, I can say something like 500 internal error and details. So I need to have the details to be sent to the browser. So I would like to say all the details are available inside my error object. So this is the error object I am using straight here. So once everything is done, I can just say response.end. So which means the error information is being sent back to the client. So that information currently I am sending in the form of HTML if there is any kind of error. If it is not error, then we need to send that data directly in the form of JSON. So coming to the else part, which means we have the data which is made available as part of this data object. So all I have to do is write the header, the response header with the 200, which means it is successful, which means it is a successful request with a response, and that particular response we are going to have in the form of JSON. So we need to return JSON here instead of HTML. Of course, you can return in the form of HTML, but that doesn't make sense as because we are developing a REST-based application. So usually it has to be returned in the form of either XML or JSON. So in this case, I would like to go with JSON representation. So the first thing is that I'm going to say something like response.write header, and I'm going to say it is a success request, and the content type, in this case I'm going to send JSON type. So you can see if it is error, I'm returning HTML based response, but if it is data, I'm actually sending application JSON. So there is a difference here. Here in this case I'm sending text HTML, but in this case I'm going to have application JSON. So okay, so this needs to be available in the form of an object, JSON object. So that is a mistake here, so let me modify this. So this needs to be application and this needs to be JSON. So we have written the header, and now we need to write the response.write, so which means all the data needs to be returned back, and once it is returned I need to end it. So I need to write the data back to the response. The data is available as part of this object. Now what I'm going to do is I just stringify whatever I have in there using data. So which means whatever the object or whatever the content I might have as part of this data has to be converted to JSON string using this particular JSON.stringify. So this data, whatever I might have, will be converted to JSON stringify, and automatically that will be sent back to the response. So this data is already a JSON object. All I'm doing is just making it in the form of a string to return back to the response. So once that is done, I'm just saying response.end here. So you can do whatever you would like to have there. So this could be either here or outside if else statement, as because I'm having this statement as the last statement, whether I use this one or this one. So you might as well have this one outside here. Directly. So either you use if condition in this way or else condition in this way, you are still going to have response.end to be executed regardless. So now that we have get list completed, let us check if this get list is working first. So we will be implementing this one bit later, so let us make sure that get list is working fine. So if you switch back to our presentation there, I have completed db.js. I somehow partially completed employee.js. We are going to look into HTTP messages a bit later, but let us start with server first. That is where the communication actually starts from. So this app.js will be actually having server module to be executed, and this server module currently I just wanted to make it available as part of core. So right click on core, add new item, and in the JavaScript, so once you select JavaScript file here, make sure that in this case I would like to call that one as server.js. So let us see one by one. The first thing is that I need to work with HTTP here. So in my previous video we already covered on how to develop a HTTP server, get and post and so on. So I'm going to use the same concept here. The first thing is that we need to have the HTTP instance using HTTP module. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I need to have my employee module to be referred here. So for that purpose I'm going to say var emp equal to require, and currently server is available here. I need to have employee, so which means I need to go back one folder, go into the controllers, and then go to the employee. So I'm going to write go to the previous folder here and then go to the controllers and then employee. So that is the employee module, which is what I'm referring. So this is the employee module which will be automatically referred here. If it is working fine, then we should be able to see all of these: get list, get, add, everything must be seen right here. emp dot get. Now you can see I have get and get list. So if you see others, I have add, delete, get list, and you also see update and all of that. So You can see that the module is already there. So now that we have the necessary modules, we need to start the server itself. So I'm going to say http dot create server, and this particular server will have this callback to be executed for each of those requests whatever we are going to receive, and that particular create server right now has to listen to a particular port number. So in this case I can say 9000, and I can say once it is alive, or once it is listening, or once it has started listening, I would like to write something to the log saying that it started listening at, and I can say 9000. Okay, so I have the create server. So I hard coded this 9000, but let us consider I would like to have this 9000 also to be configurable. So as I mentioned, all the configuration settings are going to be made available as part of settings. So let us have even the port number to be also read from the settings itself. So I go back here, and in this case I would like to say something like exports.web port, which it has to listen, and I am going to call this one as 9000. So I have to read this web port and make my server listening to this port number. So which means the settings whatever I am writing here need to be made available to the server. So which means I need to have the settings file to be also imported. So in this case I am going to say settings. Okay, hold on. So the server is here, settings is somewhere. So I have to go back to one folder and then call settings. So I have to go back to one folder and then I should have settings. Now, instead of hard coding our port number, I can just say settings dot web port. So you can see I'm using the settings right now in order to listen to that port. I don't want to hard code this. Instead, I would like to have that particular value to be directly retrieved from settings.webport and concatenate to this message and finally display that. Okay, so I have the basic server running, but I need to have the get request to be working. Why? Because the first get request I would like to take account is get list. So I need to have this get list to be executed whenever any get request comes in, and that too whenever I have employees as part of the get list. So let us see on how I can work with that one. So the first thing is that I need to see what kind of request I received. So I have switch for that case. So which means I would like to say the request.method would contain the HTTP method on what kind of request, whether it is get request or post request or put or delete. That information will be made available as part of request.method. So I can have either get or post or put or delete. So those are the only methods I'm going to support right now, but of course there are quite a few others, but I do not really worry about others. So I just really wanted to concentrate on these four methods. So if I come across anything else, now I need to display another error message. So let us not worry about the error messages right now, but I just wanted to make it like that. So we will deal with all the error messages a bit later. But I have the get request now. So as part of the get, I usually have the URL request.url. So REST is completely based on the endpoints. So endpoints means you are going to access your resources using the endpoints like employees to get all the employees. Employees slash with whatever the employee number you would like to specify in order to go to a particular employee number or employee. So you have all the URLs something similar to this one. So let me close this. So imagine I would like to say this is my web dot, or in this case it is 9000. So this is my root. So in order to go to Or in order to get all the list of employees, I might say go to this endpoint and get me list of all the employees. Similarly, if I would like to have particular employee, I would like to say something like 1001, which means get me only the employee whose employee number is 1001. So I would like to specify all of these endpoints right using the employees itself. So similarly, if I have departments, I might have something like this. So I can say departments, so which lists all the departments. If I have customers, I can say something like customers. If I have orders, I would like to have something like orders. So these are the various endpoints we are going to create. But in this case, we are not working with any of these, so I just remove all of these. So this is the GET request in order to have all the employees to be listed. And this is also going to be a GET request in order to get a particular employee. So similarly, I can have another kind of request, but instead of GET, I would like to say POST. So which means this should do an insert operation, but this should do something like fetch or read or query, whatever you would like to call it as. And this will also be fetch or read or query. And imagine I am going to use the same endpoint, but instead of post, I would like to call put. So if I use put method, it has to do update. So similarly, if I use the same endpoint with a different request called delete, it has to do delete. So you can have something similar to these employees. So if you are completely familiar with REST based development, you can take it further with respect to departments in all of these cases. So I can just say something like, instead of employees, I can say departments. And here, instead of 1001, I would like to have, say, department 10 to be displayed, something of that sort. And imagine if I would like to have all the employees to be fetched for a particular department, then I can also say something like this. So please go to department 10 and get all the employees. So this could be an endpoint which essentially returns all the employees working in department number 10. You can also make it in another way, saying that, so from the employees perspective, I can say something like employees working in department 10. So you can also define something like this. Both of these may be identical, but it depends on how you wanted to define your endpoints. You can define any of these endpoints in whatever the way you want it. And this is also called as routing indirectly. But in this case, we would like to focus only this part, and we will not be worrying about this part anymore. So let us ensure that employees is working first, which essentially lists out all the employees. So I would like to worry about employees only for the first time. So let us go to the get, and now here I am going to say request.url if it is equal to slash, which means you are at the root. So if you are at the root, what should we do? So we better display some kind of home page or whatever, but right now I would like to say response.end. I'm not going to display much, but imagine the request.url is employees. This is what I'm really caring about. So which means you are working with this one right now. So if I am there, all I have to do is I have my controller and the employee right inside the EMP. So I can just say emp dot, and you should see my get list, and that particular get list is accepting request and response, for which I already have those two automatically filled by HTTP module. So I'm going to send the same request and the same response to my get list, and that's it. So all I'm saying is that whenever I have a get request with the URL in this fashion, go to the EMP, get the list by accepting these two. So if you go back to the control get list, all you are doing is execute the SQL, this select statement, and you are sending a callback function to that execute SQL, which means after the execution of this select statement, if you have data, push the data inside data here and send the data right to the response itself. So you can see I'm using the same request and response objects right here. So let us see if this is working fine, and then we will be proceeding further if this is working 100% fine. So let us run it. Okay, I forgot to do one thing here. Let me close this. Whenever I press F5 or say whenever I say execute, it is going to execute app.js. But you can see, and inside app.js I do not have any code, so it doesn't execute anything. So if I start now, it's just listening there and it doesn't know what to do, and it is listening there forever. So which means no HTTP, no REST, nothing. It is just plain thing here. So no execution is taking place. But our server is made available here. This is important. Our server is here and it is executing app.js. So we need to have our server module to be imported as part of app.js. So that is pretty important. So I forgot that simple thing. So I am going to say now, please go to my core and get the server module.js. That's it. So whenever I do this, of course I don't need .js here. So this is pretty enough. So whenever I say require core j, oh, so I don't need, okay, I don't need to go to the previous folder. I can just say current folder, because core sits at the same level of app. So you can see, so from the app I'm saying that within the same folder of app, go to the core, and inside the core go to the server and execute this server JavaScript whatever we have. So whenever it is executing this code, you can see the create server automatically gets fired and it is going to be listening at this web port number. So the app.js literally has only one line, but behind the scenes I have the server calling EMP calling DB, and we have all the other things automatically stitched in. So now let us start and execute it. So there we go. So we have started listening at 9000, and you can see it has dynamically pulled that port number right from our settings. So once we have our particular server running, we need to test the HTTP GET, which is nothing but get using /employees. So if this is successful, then only we can say it is doing whatever we were expecting. So for that purpose I am using a Chrome related plugin called Postman. You can also use the advanced REST client if you are familiar with, or you can use Postman. So if you are not familiar with any of those two, go to the Chrome, and under the Chrome you are going to see apps, and under the apps you are going to see these two if you install them. If you do not have any of these two, then you need to install right from the web store. So go to the web store and then search for Postman, and you are going to see Postman. So just install this one, or you can also say advanced REST client, and you are going to see this one. So either you can install this one or this one, so you can use either of these two, and I have got both on my machine. So once you have any of those two, you can directly go to your apps whatever you have in here and just click on that one to get to the post, in this case Postman. So this is the simple REST based plugin in order to work with whatever the REST service you would like to maintain. So in this case, our particular REST service, you can see it is actually listening at 9000. So let me go to localhost 9000, and at the same time under the 9000, if you switch back, I have to go to the employees, though this is important. So I go to /employees here, go back to your Postman and say /employees and click send. And if everything is successful, and it is successful, you can see I got 200 So this is nothing but the 200 code whatever you have sent from your get list. So if you go to get list of your controller, you see when there is no error you are actually sending 200. So that is the 200 you have in there, and you are sending application.json based content, and you can see I have the data, and whatever the data you are seeing right now is exactly whatever you have in your database. So I have 6 records here, the last being 1006, and you should be able to see the 6 records here with the last one as 1006. So we have our particular, what I say, the get is working fine, and you can see there are several other HTTP methods here. You can use post, put, or delete. So we haven't completed any of that stuff, but we actually completed only employees, the two with get. So let us proceed with other things. So I switch back here, let me close this, and now we have the get list to be working fine. Okay, let us test this one. Imagine I am providing something like EMPAAA. So this one is not available. If that is not available, it is supposed to throw an error, and let us see if I am getting this kind of error as part of my response. So let me start again. It is listening at 9000. So let me open my Postman. And as part of that I have the employees and click send. So now you can see I have that particular error, and it is returning an HTML out of it, and the title is having 500. So if you go back here, the title is just 500. So I'm getting the same value right there. And if you switch back to your server, you can see you already have the server also giving the message invalid object name EMPAAA. Why? Because as part of the error, whatever you are going to receive inside the db.execute SQL, you are actually writing to the console. So this is the one which actually writes to the console. But you are not just only writing to the console, you are also writing back to your response using callback. So if you go back here to your employee, this function is going to be executed with the error information, and as part of that information you are having the HTML to be displayed, and internal error and the details with exactly what we are actually getting back from our error object. So imagine I do not want to have HTML here but JSON with some kind of error information, very similar to information whatever I have in here, but not using HTML but using JSON kind of data. Why? Because I am expecting the data to be available in the form of JSON, and if there exists any error, it is better to have the error also to be in the form of JSON but not really HTML. So for that purpose, let me make a tiny change to my employee in such a way that instead of this HTML, I would like to have the response to be made in the form of JSON. So I would like to go in here. So I would still need 500 there, but as part of 500, I do not really want HTML based communication. Sorry, response. So I would like to have JSON based response to be sent back, but still with the error 500 anyway. So on top of that, I would like to say response.write, and as part of write I would like to say json.stringify, and I'm going to provide an object here, and that particular JSON object is going to have only one property called data, and that particular property essentially will have some error message, something like error occurred, and whatever the error I have as part of ERR should be returned back. So I'm just using ERR here, and I'm saying that this is the JSON object which needs to be converted to string and sent as part of response. And anyway, that write is going to be finally end using response.end. So let me execute this now and see how it is going to respond back. So it is listening now. So let me switch back to my Postman, and now let me send it again. And now you can see instead of HTML I received data, sorry, JSON based data. and still we still have that what is error information. So which one is better, HTML or JSON? So in this case JSON looks better for me, but imagine I would like to make even this one to be configured, and I would like to also make this one much more modular. Why? Because this error I am going to use not only in get list, I have to use in get or add or update anytime the error may occur. So it is always better to have this kind of response to be, I mean all the error messages or HTTP messages to be maintained by its own module. And you can see as part of my presentation I was actually talking about HTTP messages just for that purpose. So I go back to core. I'm going to add a new item called HTTP messages, and this module is going to be responsible to have all kinds of responses to whatever you are writing here, something similar to this. All these responses are going to be reused everywhere. So for that purpose I would like to have these things to be maintained as part of HTTP messages. And imagine as part of HTTP messages I would like to have a configuration setting in such a way that if the configuration setting is HTML, then all the errors have to be responded in the form of HTML. But if I say the setting is JSON, then all the responses have to be made as JSON. So let me modify my settings. So as part of my settings I would like to say something like exports.http messages format, and in this case by default I would like to say HTML, and I go back to HTTP messages and I'm going to use settings here. So I get my settings required. So where is my settings file? So I am here. I had to go back one step and then get to the settings. So I have to go back to previous folder and then get settings on top of it. So let us ensure we have settings there. So you could see dbconfig, and we should also see what is that HTTP messages format. So I have that one. So the first thing is that I would like to have whatever I am using here. The first thing is I need to have 500 to be made available as part of this. So I am going to say exports dot show 500 error, which will have its own request and response, and any kind of error you are going to pass to that. Where is mine? Okay. So as part of this I'm going to check if my particular option is HTML. That is the first check I'm going to have. So I'm going to say if my settings.http messages format is actually HTML. Okay, so I missed that. Okay, so if my setting is HTML, I would like to have this response to be sent back right here. So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to remove this. You can see I'm using the response here and the error right here. So if my settings is not HTML, then I would like to have JSON to be returned. So in this case the JSON is going to be something like this. So I'm going to have 500 here and also 500 here. This one is text HTML, this is application, and here I'm writing JSON, here I'm writing HTML. So now that this whole thing is available or made available as part of HTTP messages, all I have to do is just execute show 500 from employee.js. But this is available as a different module, so I need to import that module in employee.js. So I am here, I need to get to this one. So I need to go back one, go to the core, get to the HTTP messages. So I can say variable HTTP messages equal to require, go back to core, and then get to HTTP messages. So that is the module I'm going to use here. So if I come across any error, I don't really need to care about anything else other than just calling HTTP messages dot show 500, send whatever the request you got here to the same object response, and I have the error here, so I'm going to send the same error right there. So you can see I'm making things much more simpler and reusable. So let me try to execute it and test it. So let me open my Postman again. So let me send it, and now you can see I got everything in the form of HTML. So let me stop it, go to the settings, and instead of HTML, say I would like to have JSON, and I run it. So it's still taking some time, so let me close this and re-execute this. Okay, it started listening. So let me again go in here and click send, and this time you can see it has automatically switched to JSON just by modifying your setting. So in that way it became more modular, more reusable, and more configurable. And there is one more thing. I don't need respond.end here anymore. Why? Because I need to have that one also to be made as part of HTTP messages, so that after writing any of these I would like to have end here. But let us switch back. I'm still using response.write, and this is 200. This is also a HTTP message, and if I really want to have this one in place, I need to use response.end here. But let us think of a different scenario. Even imagine I am going to get here. Even this is supposed to return some kind of JSON data. So again, I might be reusing or duplicating the same code here as well. So let us move this one also right inside HTTP messages. So as this particular HTTP messages is for not just the HTTP messages, I would also like to use the same thing for sending the JSON as well. So I would like to say send JSON as another method which is going to be exposed outside, which accepts request, response, and data which needs to be sent back to the browser or the client. So in this case I am going to use whatever I have in here. So just copy this and paste it here. So which means I'm saying that send the JSON with the 200 message always, and at the same time I'm going to send the data whatever I'm going to send and have the response end. And let us do some cleanup also here. So I imagine if the data is not available, I shouldn't really be doing any kind of conversion here. So I'm going to just put some condition here saying that if there is data, then only try to modify that. I mean, try to send that data by converting to string. If there is no data, do not worry about this statement at all. So that is a little cleanup I am doing here. Now all I have to do is use this send JSON right here. So I'm using the same thing here, whatever I did earlier, and instead of show 500, I'm going to say dot send JSON, and instead of error I have to send the data, which is nothing but the data you are using here, and I can get rid of all of this stuff. And now you can see my employee controller itself is actually made quite simple with just saying execute SQL. If it is successful, send the data back to the client. If not, send an error. As simple as that. So let us see if this is working fine. So I don't need EMP anymore. So let me get rid of this. I just save this and start it. And let me go to Postman and say send. And there we go. We have our data to be returned in the form of JSON. So if you would like to have something like send XML, you can code on your own, and again in the settings you can say HTTP message format as XML, and you can do whatever you wanted, so that your REST service actually works with both JSON and also XML if that is your requirement. But anyway, now that we have completed our get list, we still need to complete get, add, update, delete, and so on. So before we move further and further, let us quickly take a look at server.js. So imagine I'm having a get request, and at the same time I'm saying that if it is home, I'm not sending anything but just an end. So this might not be really that good. So I need to do something better here. And at the same time, for the post or if my particular server is not supposed to honor anything other than these four, I need to send an error here saying that that particular HTTP method is not supported, kind of a deal. So for that purpose, I would like to modify my HTTP messages in such a way that I am going to send the HTTP code called 405. So this will be very much similar to whatever I have in here, so which is called as 405 in this case. This will also be 405. This will be 405. This will be 405. 405. And in this case, instead of internal error occurred, I am going to say method not supported. And this is going to be text XML, which is fine, and I would like to simply say method not supported here, and I don't need any of this stuff, so I can just say method not supported. So similarly, I'm going to use the same message whatever I have in here, like method not supported, and here I can say method not supported also. So that is another way. So just like show 500, I have show 405, and there are other things which we might really be in need, like 404 error, which means something not found. So if the user is trying to go to an URL which will never exist, then you have to expose 404, which means you have to send 404. So I have to say something like resource not found. So I can say resource not found here. So this is also 404, 404, and resource not found here. Okay. So now that I have 500, 404, 405, and there are a couple more other things which are needed. For example, I might be needing 413, which means whenever the user is trying to bloat my web server with too much of information, like sending 100 MB of information during post, so that is not necessary, so we need to handle that one too. So I am going to say this is a 413 error, 413, 413, 413, 413, and I am going to say request entity too large. So that is the message I am going to respond back. So I can say request entity too large and request entity too large. Okay, and similarly I would also like to have success messages to be also sent back using send 200. So I would like to have one more thing called send 200. So this is not a message, but it is just a response saying that the request is successful. So we don't really need all this information here, and for that matter we don't even need a error object here. Why? Because we are not using that error object in any of this here, so we don't need that one here as well, and we don't need that one here. 405, we do not use it, but we are using error right here, so we need that. Okay, so as part of send 200, which means all I really need to send is just the header and nothing else. So I can just say I'm going to send 200, which means it is successful. And in this case, I would like to send the success message always in the form of JSON. Of course, it doesn't have any data, so I just wanted to mention something like this. So this is what I say, send 200, which means whenever you are inserting or updating or deleting, if the message is successful, all I'm going to say is send 200. So this send 200 will be essentially responding back saying that it is 200 message which is going to be sent responded back. And of course I need to have response.end. If that is missed, the server will be, the client will be listening forever, waiting forever. So I have send and everything, all of those messages should be in place. So now let me switch back to the server. Now if it is default, so which means whenever we are not supporting that, all I'm going to say is http messages dot. Okay, we did not import our http messages here, so let me import it. So http, so server.js is in the same folder as of http messages. So I can say in the same folder get http messages.js and use the same thing in order to send method not supported error. So that is show 405 error, and I am going to say request response. So similarly, if our particular what I say request is actually a root, I need to have some kind of home page to be shown to the users so that they can really test on the information or the URLs or all the endpoints list which might be made available. So for that purpose, I would like to write something like http messages dot show homepage, and I would like to say request response. So which means I am going to say the home page related HTML so that whenever the users go to the home page, all I really wanted to do is some kind of show a help page to get to the necessary endpoints. So I need to implement show home. So let me go to my HTTP messages here, and here as part of this I would like to say exports dot show home page, and I would like to have request and response. And as part of this home page, as I mentioned again, I would like to have the same kind of response to be made based on the settings. So if it is HTML, I would like to have some kind of HTML to be sent back to the user. Okay, this is not good, so let me go with this one. Oh, everything is error. Okay, so in this case I would like to say it is 200, which means it is a success request, and I do not really need this stuff here, so I just remove this, and I do not need this one either, so I just remove these two. And as part of this one I'm going to say it is a home page, and as part of the body I would like to say something like valid endpoints, and within the break tag I would like to say employees get to list all employees. So similarly I can say if you provide something similar to this one, I would like to have a better one saying that you use employees, employee number, it is a get request to list or to search for an employee. So something similar to that. Of course, you can enhance this with lists or design a beautiful web page or whatever, but that is just the simple thing I would like to use. And as part of this one, I would like to have a different kind of object to be returned. Okay, as part of this, I would like to have something like a collection of JSON objects. And the first thing is that I would like to say URL and use employees using the operation get. This is just help. You can put whatever the information you would like to use. Description to list all employees. And that is the first thing. And similarly, I would like to have one more JSON object. So let me bring this to the next line. So in this case, I would like to, sorry, this is employees. So let us make it employees and use whatever I said. This is the syntax. So employee number in order to search for an employee. As I mentioned, this is just some kind of help to the consumer. So if by default, if they go for home page, if you configured everything for HTML, they are going to see our HTML. If they configured for JSON, they are going to get the JSON saying that this is the way to get to our particular operations, or say our REST interfaces or our endpoints are available in this fashion. So that's a kind of help page. And of course, you need to further enhance this by writing post, put, delete in both of these two areas, but we will do that as necessary. So now I'm going to execute this show home directly as part of server, which is already there. Okay, so let me try and see if this is working fine. Okay, I have an error here. Cannot find a module HTTP messages, as because server is in the same folder as of HTTP messages. So I'm trying to actually go to a different folder, which is the previous folder. That was the mistake. So let me execute it. And there we go. We have 9,000. And let me open my Postman. And I am going to say just 9,000 with no employees. This is the home page. I click send. Okay, I forgot one thing. You can see it is listening forever, so which means certainly I missed one thing, which is response.end. So that is pretty important. If it is listening forever, if the client is listening or waiting forever, which means most likely you have missed this guy. So let us start it. And I have 9,000. So let me send it again. And now you can see I have the response saying that we have all of these particular endpoints to be used whenever you would like to go to help page, which is usually in the home page. So imagine I am actually going to the settings and switch this one to HTML and restart my particular server. And I go to this and click send. Now you can see I got something similar to this. So I have a BR tag. Oh, okay. So this employee number is actually behaving something really bad. Why? Because it is treating this one as something like HTML element. So that is not supposed to be happening. But anyway, that is a simple fix. So let me go back here. And as part of this one, I can say employee number to search for employee with employee number. So that will be much easier. So let me click send, and now you can see this is much better to really see on how it is going. Now you can actually click on employees, and you can see I have employees here, and click send. And now you can see I got the JSON. So I have the home page and I have the employees as well. So in that way I have currently get with the huge employees to be listed down, but I still need to work with one employee, post, put, delete, and everything else. So let us do all of those one by one. So let us switch to employee.js. As we have implemented getList, in the same manner we need to implement for all of these, and those will be pretty similar to whatever we already did earlier. So I'm going to use the same statement, except that here I need to provide where employee number equal to whatever the employee number I am going to receive as part of my parameter here. So I can say this one. And if any error, I'm going to use the 500. If not, I'm just going to send whatever the JSON I might receive. So we are done with the get to. And add is a bit different. It is not as simple as select, as because we actually need to dynamically frame our insert statement, and we need to also ensure that if no error exists, we need to do some kind of trial check here, and also ensure that all of the data is in place. So we need to do some kind of validation here. So let us start with try, and as part of try I'm going to have catch so that any exception could be caught. So if there is any exception, you can say I'm going to reuse whatever I have in here. So I'm going to use this with exception ex. So the first thing is that if the request body has got any information, if no information is available, I cannot actually add or insert data. So I need to throw an error if the request body is empty. So for that purpose, I'm going to say if request body is not provided, then throw a new error saying that input not valid. So this new error, whatever I'm throwing now, will be essentially automatically caught in the catch, and the same error, whatever I'm messaging I'm providing here, will be sent through show 500. So that is the first simple validation I did. And the next thing is that I need to parse whatever the information I received from the request body. So in order to parse, I'm using JSON.parse whatever the message we get in the form of string. So this request body usually in the form of string. That string I'm converting to JSON object and I'm putting into data. For some reason, if it is not in the form of JSON format, this line is going to throw an error, and automatically we are going to catch it here. So, and again, we need to test one more. If the data itself is made available, which means if the data is there. If no data is there, again we need to throw an error. So I'm going to say if there is no data, again throw the same error whatever I have earlier. So I'm going to say if there is no data, then go for input not valid error. Now I have the data. I have everything in place to really insert my particular data to the database. So I need to frame my SQL statement. So I'm going to start with insert into emp, and I need to provide all the column names. And now let me give the values as well. So SQL plus equal to, and now I'm going to use something like instead of writing something like this is going to be quite complicated. Like for an employee number, I had to use data.employee number, and again I have to use comma and employee name and so on. So this is going to be quite complicated. So even though you can write it, I just wanted to make our life easier just by using some utility. So I would like to have a simple utility to be developed, or say which is already in place for Node.js. So let me take care of that one. So I have something like util, require util. So this is a built-in package. Hold on. So util is a built-in package which is already made available as part of our node, and I can use this util to actually frame a more easier statement. So this is similar to our printf kind of a deal. So if you are familiar with C programming, you should be able to have printf, or if you are familiar with the .NET, you should be having something like string.format. So similarly, I can say util.format, and now I can have my entire rest of the statement to be provided here. The first thing is that I need to have employee number to be provided in the form of decimal, then employee name to be provided in the form of string in the form of quotations, as part of quotations, and salary decimal, and department number decimal. So now I can easily provide the rest. So I can say my data is available in the form of data. So you can say your entire JSON or your data is available in data. Now I can say data.ename. Sorry, the first one is employee number. Data.ename, data.salary, and data.department number. So I have everything in place. So which means essentially to this insert statement you are adding all the values. So the first value, which is nothing but employee number, will be gone into employee number. The second value, you can see that is a string, which is nothing but employee name, will be gone into this, and so on. So now that you made SQL statement to be available, I need to execute it. So again, the execution is as simple as executing this guy. So I am going to say execute whatever the statement I have as part of my variable SQL. So you can see this is the variable I am using here. So if it is successful, then I am going to say I don't need any JSON to be sent here. Why? Because it doesn't return any data. I am going to say send 200, which means it is just successful. So I'm going to say send 200. You can see in my HTTP messages I have written send 200, which essentially says write the header 200 saying that it is successful request. So if it is not a successful request, I am actually throwing an error. So in that way I actually completed my add, and let us check if add is working, and at the same time let us see if get is also working. For that purpose I need to switch back to our server, and our server currently you can see I actually wrote code only for get, and that too only for employees. I did not write anything for post, and I did not write anything for employees slash something. So I need to modify my server accordingly. So the first thing is that let us go for okay, let me go for else, and inside the else I need to check if the user has sent something like employee number as 1001. I need to test this one as part of the URL. So for that purpose I'm going to use a regular expression here, but as I mentioned, this is simple and we wanted to make this one simple, so I'm just going to use a very basic regular expression, but in your case you might really wanted to validate it and make it production ready. So for that purpose I'm going to provide a simple pattern of regular expression saying that the expression or the value whatever I'm going to send might have any kind of digits in between 0 to 9 and for any number of times. Of course this may not be really suitable for all, but just going with whatever the simplest I have right now. So now I can say create a new regular expression object based on employees and my pattern of employee number. So I have the regular expression, and now test if my particular pattern is valid. So what you are saying is whatever the regular expression object you have created, you are testing this regular expression based on the URL you are already fetching. So if your URL goes or successfully tested against this pattern, which means you have employee number at the very end. If not, you do not have it. So in this case what I'm going to say is if our pattern is successful, okay, I need to have what I say, that particular employee number to be extracted. Whatever I have in here needs to be extracted. So I'm going to create another regular expression only based on the pattern I have defined earlier, so which is nothing but this one. I have the pattern. So based on the pattern, I'm going to say please get the employee number which is available as part of request.url. So using the same pattern 0 to 9, I'm just saying that please get whatever I have in here and make it available as part of employee. So once I have employee number, the next thing is that just similar to employee.getList, I am going to call employee.get. But if you see employee.get, you can see it is accepting request, response, and also the employee number. So I need to send the employee number as well right here. So that is pretty much about whatever I have as part of employee get. But imagine this pattern is not satisfied, which means you give something really stupid like slash department or slash customers or slash something which may not be really valid. So if such is the case, then I need to provide an 404 error saying that we do not support that particular URL whatever you have provided. So you can see how easier it is for me to use HTTP messages, as because I mentioned everything as part of show home, show 404, show 405, everything in the form of HTTP messages, and we are going to reuse the same over and over again. So we are pretty much done with the get, but we have not defined our post. So post is pretty similar. As I mentioned, my pattern is the same thing for the post. So you can see I'm going to use the same pattern for post, put, and delete. So let us go back to my this thing, and the first thing I'm going to test is whether that particular URL is employees or not. So if it is post and if the URL is employees, then I have to add something. If you are trying to post to a different URL other than employees, then it is supposed to be an error. So I am going to say if you are posting to an URL which is not employees, show me an error message. And the same thing will always be same. I mean the same logic will be made available to other parts as well. Why? Because as I mentioned, we are going to use same employees everywhere, except that the methods are going to be different. And if you return back, you can see for the different methods we are still working with same kind of URLs. And of course you can always change something like employee add. If you would like to say add, you can do add here, and you can say update here, and you can say something like delete here. Okay, but usually the practice is something like employees or employees add. You can do even in that way. So I can say employees update, but you have to provide the same thing in your in your HTTP tool if you are doing it. So you can go in this fashion, or you can just forget about add. Why? Because post automatically implies it is an add operation. So most of the time REST will be working without really providing this kind of information if you are going to provide delete, put, and post. So you can provide whatever you want it here, but just wanted to let you know you have all the options in place. Okay, so now that we are in post, we need to get the body. So as part of post, we are actually sending some information to Node.js from the HTTP in the form of some kind of object. So we need to get all that posted information here, and as part of that one, I am going to have request body to be determined, and whatever the code I am going to write here has been explained very clearly in one of my previous videos. So if you are not following whatever the code I write here, please refer to my previous video. So I am going to say request body starting with nothing. So if my particular request is sending the data, I am actually registering an event here saying that whenever it sends any data, please execute this particular callback function. Okay, and that is pretty much it. So on data, which means whenever my service receives data, I need to actually append that data to my request body. So you can see request body. So this data event gets fired for each and every chunk of information whatever the server receives. So this will be continuously executed, which means this function will be executed continuously as long as it is receiving the data over and over again from the client. So this may not be in one instance. It could be something like, sometimes if you are sending more information like 5 MB of data, that 5 MB at once will not be reached to the server, but instead it will be reached in the form of chunks, and for each and every chunk this particular function gets executed. And now I need to do a quick checkup here, something like if my particular length, which means whatever the information I'm going to send from the client, is actually passing beyond the limit of 10 MB, which means something like 0 to the power of 7 here, which is nothing but 10 MB. I can just say 10 MB for here. You do not want to carry anything more. So you would like to provide something like invalid message. So you can see as part of HTTP messages, we actually wrote something like request entity too large. So I'm going to raise this one, show 14. So let me go back here and I'm going to say HTTP messages dot show 413 message, which is nothing but it is huge entity which is not supported by this server. So that is the simple thing what I'm going to do there. And once we have completed the entire data receiving, so I'm going to register to the end. So which means end is the event which gets fired once all the chunks have been received by the server. So which means there is no more data which can be received by the server, and then end is the last event which gets fired once the entire data has been received by the server. So once that is done, all you have to do is you have to pass this request body to our employee, just like EMP. So EMP is the one which has got add, and that particular add is accepting request, response, and my request body, whatever you gathered earlier in the form of chunks. Just send it over. And this and add, if you go to the employee.add, you can see I'm receiving the request body there, and that particular request body I'm converting to JSON, and using the same data object I'm extracting employee number, name, salary and department number, generating an insert, and then calling execute SQL. So the pretty much important thing is that whatever the body you are going to send needs to be in the form of JSON object. Otherwise it is going to hit a kind of error called input not valid during the JSON parsing, and that is where it is going to throw an error, and any kind of error whatever it is going to throw, we are going to send in the form of 500 message. Okay, so this is pretty much about post, whatever we have in place. So let us see and test both of these operations, like get with employees and an employee number, and post, try to add something to the database. So let us switch back to our postman. So I need to execute this first. Let me execute this, make sure it is listening as 9000, and I go in here. So let me make sure the send is working here for the employees. So you can see I have all the employees fetched. So let me maximize this. Okay, so let me create a new tab here. So in this case I'm going to use same employees here, but I would like to have only one employee information to be retrieved with get request. So I'm trying to retrieve 1003, and you can see it has retrieved 1003. So if you go back to your database, you can see 1003 is actually done. So let me try to retrieve 1006 using postman. So I'm going to say 1006, click send, and now you can see it is retrieving Smith. Okay, of course I did not really as part of this particular application, I did not really go with not found, or if I provide something like 2001 or whatever which is not found, I did not handle this. You can see it is retrieving, or say it is returning nothing here. So if you would like to throw an error message, of course you will need to write accordingly. So for now, we do not have that one in place, but it should be straightforward. So in that way, my get requests are working, and I have the home page which is retrieving this. I have employees list with this endpoint. I have one employee to be searched using this endpoint with the get method. And now let us do a post. So I need to have the post to be implemented. And as I have seen, like as part of my thing here, the post actually goes with /employees only. That is the endpoint. So I go back here, I go in here, I copy this, I paste here, and ensure that it is a post request instead of get. If you go back to the previous, it is a get request, but here it is a post request. And as part of this post request, I need to provide the body. So this is pretty important. And as part of the body, I would like to say raw. So raw means you are going to provide your own data whatever the way you want it. Okay, and at the same time I would like to mention that it is JSON type. So I would like to send raw input, and I'm just going to copy whatever I have in here so that I need not really type in everything I needed. So in this case I would like to go with 2001, and I would like to say Richard, and I don't need a comma here, so let me remove the last comma. So you can see I'm using a post on employees, sending the body which is of type JSON, and this is the JSON body I'm going to send. And if I send it, that particular body is going to be received and finally be added to the request body in the form of a string. So that string is further sent to add. So let me switch back here, and if everything works fine, it has to be added to the database. Okay, it says no response received, but we have 200. You can see as part of my response, if everything is fine, this add, let us go to our employee.js, and that add, if everything is successful, all I'm doing is just send only 200. So you can see inside the response of 200, you are just sending 200 with really nothing to be written as part of response. So it looks like it has added from our particular HTTP tool. Let us go to the SQL Server and refresh this, and you can see I have in the SQL Server. And let us again go back to our Postman and check as part of our get request for employees. So earlier I have till 1006. Now let me send it again, and we should be having 2001 here. So similarly, if I wanted to send one more, I would like to again do the same thing, but instead I would like to say 2002, and I'm going to say Frank with 6500, and probably department number is 20. Click send, and now you can see status is 200. Go back to your get and employees and click send, and you can see after Richard I have Frank here, and if you go back to your database, you are going to see Frank right there. So in that way we actually have our post to be successfully written. So put and delete are almost straightforward. So let us work on those two and complete our video as soon as possible. So update is going to be very similar to whatever I have written here. But of course this one actually needs a bit of more validations. So for example, if employee number is not provided during update, I cannot do anything. So I need to test if my particular data is not having employee number. So if it is not having employee number, then I have to throw an error saying that employee number not provided. And now after that, I'll be starting creating the SQL, and I'm going to say something like update emp set, And imagine you provided employee number, but you did not provide employee name, salary, and department number. You did not provide any data to update. Then that is also supposed to be thrown back to the user saying that you did not really provide any data to update. For that purpose, I need to have some checkup as well. So I am going to say variable is data provided equal to false by default. So which means I am starting with no data is provided. But if the data for employee name is provided, then I am going to update my SQL statement saying that employee name needs to be updated with whatever the data I received from the employee name, and this is the update statement ending with employee name. And at the same time, I need to ensure that is data provided is set to true, which means I provided some data. So similarly, I'm going to have salary as well. So instead of employee name, I'm going to have salary here, and I'm going to have salary here as well. So as part of this salary, I don't need any string here for salary. So I'm going to remove all the string related stuff here. So just make sure that it is salary. So similarly, I'm going to have one more thing called department number. So as part of this department number, I'm going to say I'm going to send department number which needs to be updated as part of my update statement. Okay, there we go. So we have update, employee table, and all these columns need to be updated based on the provision of data. We need to remove the last comma. We don't need that comma, so we need to remove that comma here. So instead of removing the comma, anyway I have a trailing space here, sorry, the prefixed space here, so we didn't need a space at the end. So let me remove this comma. So the easiest way is you already have the SQL built, so I'm going to say SQL dot slice. So from the end, get everything except the and, that is one character from the and let me give you something like remove last comma. So if you are actually doing employee name but not having sal and department number, you can see employee name goes in here, but comma will be unnecessarily added. So in either case, either in any of these cases, you are going to end with a comma, and I am removing that comma and placing it equal. But I do need to have the where condition to be applied to this update statement, otherwise it is going to update the entire table. So I need to have something like SQL where employee number equal to data.employee number. So you can say I'm already testing if employee number is not there. If it is not there, it is going to be throwing a message. If it is there, I'm going to send that one as part of my SQL statement. And I am not needed to change this one. Why? Because the same SQL needs to be executed here. If it is successful, I return it 200. If it is not successful, I'm going to send it as 500. So we don't need any of this stuff here, which is perfectly written in all the ways possible. And for the delete, so for the delete, I'm going to have the same kind of update, whatever the code I have in update. I need to have the employee number for the delete, and I don't need any kind of data to be updated, so I remove everything till here. So all I really need to modify is delete from emp where employee number equal to this one. So the rest remains the same. So you can see in that way I have the delete, I have update, I have add, everything in place. Okay, now let us go to the server, and just like post, I need to have the put and delete also to be written in the same fashion. So let me copy whatever I have in there for the post. So I copy this entire thing and I put that in the in the put. So it is going to the same employees, the same request body, and I put all of the stuff, and here instead of add I need to call update. So similarly, I need to have the delete, and everything else except delete is going to be the same. So you can see the code is almost similar here, and you can actually make this particular part inside another function and make it more reusable instead of copying and pasting the same code over and over again. But as I mentioned, I just wanted to make this one simple and readable and understandable. So I just wanted to maintain the same code duplicated here in this case. But as I mentioned, you can really make this much more structured and decrease your code repetition. So looks like we are done with the entire implementation. So let me execute this and test all of our operations. So let me go back to this one. So I have the post. So let me have one more tab here, and I am going to use the same employees, but instead of get or post, I am going to use put. So earlier I was actually doing some kind of modification to the frank. So let me copy this employee information to our put. You can see I'm using put, and this is supposed to be JSON, and I'm having the body here. So I provide the body, and imagine I'm not providing employee number. So let me delete employee number and see what's going on. It is a put request again against employees. The body, I missed employee number, and click send. And you can see I received an error saying that employee number not provided. It is supposed to be not provided here. So that is a typo I need to modify. So we can modify that later. Anyway, let me modify that. So where is that? Employee number not provided is supposed to be part of employees here. Add update not provided right here. So let me execute this. So let us go back to our click send, and you can see in this case I got not provided. So let me provide the employee number now. So I would like to have just only the salary to be modified but not employee name, and I do not want the department also to be modified. I do not want that. So I just need to increase the salary of Frank from 6500 to 7500. So I just click send. It says 200, which means it is supposed to be successful. So Frank earlier it was 6500. I execute it, and you can see I got 7500 right away. And if I go back to this and go back here, and I would like to test only Frank here 2002 and click send, and you can see I got 7500 here. So similarly, if I say 6500 and click send, it is successful. Go back to my get request for the same employee, click send, and it is going to be 6500. And imagine if I would like to modify the employee name itself, I can say something like Robert, and even I would like to increase the salary to 8500. So I am going to modify employee name and salary for the same employee 200. So let's click send. Hold on, I did a mistake here. You can see unexpected string is the problem, as because I did not put a comma here. So that is pretty important. And even if you go to the server, okay, we did not actually put the console here, but it has automatically responded back saying that unexpected string, and this was caught at this level, json.parse. That was the level it has caught. So if you would like to have a better understanding, we can easily go to the catch and have a breakpoint there and see how it is going on. So let me again remove this comma here and click send, which is supposed to throw an error after this parse. So if I press F10 here, you can see it has immediately jumped from there to exception, and you can see as part of the exception I have unexpected string. So I press continue here, and you can see unexpected string is the message I received. So that is a typo. I just press comma here. Let me remove my debugging breakpoints here. And now I click send. It is success. Let us go back to my 202 here, which is 202, and it is a get request. Click send, and you can see it is Robert with 8500. Okay, now that we have our get with particular searching of employee, post, put, we need to test delete as well. So let me go with this, and I'm using employees again, and instead of get, post, put, I'm going to use delete. So as part of the delete, I need to send the body, and as part of the body, I would like to mention that one as JSON type, and I'm going to copy this, paste here, and for the delete, I do not need anything other than employee number. So for the delete, all I really need is employee number. So if you switch back to your code for delete, you can see in the delete, all you are using is just only employee number. You are not using anything other than employee number in this whole code. So even though if you pass others, we are not going to throw any error. So but if you miss employee number, it is supposed to throw some error. So for example, I delete this and click send, and you can see it says method not supported. Oh, okay. Delete, okay, the mistake whatever I did is just I forgot to place break here, and that is the reason even though I provided delete, whenever it is throwing the error message, it did not break here, and further it has gone down and showing 405 message. So now I execute this. So I go to postman, I'm not providing employee number, and click send, and now you can see employee number not provided. This is supposed to be not provided, so let me fix that one too. So I go to employee.js, and this is supposed to be not provided. So let me save this, restart my service again. Okay, it has started. So I go in here, and now I click send, and now you can see it is 500 with employee not provided. So if I provide the employee number here, so whatever the employee number I provided, so let me copy this whole thing. So I copy this into this, and I don't need a comma here. So I would like to delete 2002. You can see I have delete employees 2002 and click send, and now you can see it is 200. So if I go back here, where is that one? I would like to search for 2002 using get operation, click send, and you can see there is no employee with 2002 there. So if you go to database, if you click execute, you can see 2002 is gone. So in that way, we actually completed our full-fledged video on covering all the CRUD operations or CRUD operations related to REST-based pure Node.js service, which covers create, update, read, and delete using HTTP GET, POST, PUT, and delete respectively. So in my next video, we are going to cover much more in-depth with respect to the REST operations, but not really using pure Node.js, but we are going to use other things like Restify or Express.js to really have the same kind of application to be developed over and over again. And on top of that, I would also like to introduce on how the authentication token mechanism needs to be made as part of REST-based applications.